When people think of ancient Egypt, they picture towering pyramids, richly decorated temples, and walls covered with colorful hieroglyphs. Yet hidden behind one of Egypt's most celebrated temples is a structure that challenges nearly everything visitors expect to see. At first glance, it doesn't resemble the elegant architecture that made the civilization famous. There are no elaborate carvings stretching across every wall, no vibrant scenes of pharaohs presenting offerings to the gods. Instead, enormous blocks of deep red granite rise from the earth with an almost unsettling simplicity. Their smooth surfaces are nearly bare, their scale overwhelming, and the precision with which they were assembled continues to spark debate more than a century after they were uncovered. This is the Osireion, an enigmatic monument located at Abydos in southern Egypt. For thousands of years, Abydos was regarded as one of the holiest places in the Egyptian world. Long before tourists arrived with cameras, pilgrims journeyed across the Nile Valley, believing this was where the boundary between life and death became remarkably thin. According to ancient Egyptian tradition, Abydos was intimately connected with Osiris, the god who ruled over the afterlife and symbolized resurrection. Because of that sacred association, generations of kings sought to leave their mark here. Royal tombs dating back to Egypt's earliest dynasties were constructed in the surrounding desert, and over time, the region evolved into one of the country's most important religious centers. Dominating the landscape is the magnificent temple of Seti I, one of the finest surviving temples from Egypt's New Kingdom. Every corridor displays remarkable craftsmanship. The walls are covered with beautifully carved inscriptions, and within its chambers lies the famous Abydos King List, a historical record that has helped Egyptologists reconstruct the sequence of ancient Egyptian rulers. The mystery begins only after visitors walk beyond its rear walls. Descending through a long stone passage, the atmosphere changes dramatically. Brightly decorated reliefs disappear, replaced by silent granite walls unlike anything found elsewhere in the complex. The architecture suddenly becomes massive, stripped of ornament, and almost industrial in appearance. It feels as though two completely different civilizations built two neighboring monuments. This hidden structure remained buried beneath sand and debris for centuries until archaeologists began excavating the site during the early 20th century. What they uncovered surprised even experienced researchers. Before them stood gigantic granite pillars supporting equally massive stone beams, each weighing many dozens of tons. Even more astonishing was the quality of the masonry. The blocks fit together with extraordinary precision despite the absence of mortar. In many places, the joints are so fine that even today they appear almost seamless. Such workmanship immediately raised questions. Why would a structure built beside one of Egypt's most ornate temples look so radically different? Why abandon decorative art in favor of colossal, unadorned stone? Those questions would become only the beginning. As archaeologists continued clearing the monument, they realized they had uncovered something that refused to fit comfortably into the accepted history of ancient Egypt. Whether the Osireion was truly built during the reign of Seti I, or whether it preserves the remains of something even older, remains one of the site's most fascinating and controversial debates. And the deeper researchers looked, the stranger the evidence appeared. The sheer appearance of the Osireion is enough to leave most visitors speechless. But its greatest mystery isn't how it looks, it's how it was built. Unlike the limestone found throughout much of Abydos, the Osireion's central structure is made from enormous blocks of red granite. This stone wasn't quarried nearby. Its source lies hundreds of kilometers to the south around Aswan, one of the few places in Egypt where this exceptionally hard granite occurs naturally. That immediately raises an obvious question. How were these gigantic stones transported such an extraordinary distance over 3,000 years ago? Ancient Egyptian engineers were undoubtedly masters of logistics. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence showing they transported statues, obelisks, and massive building stones along the Nile using specially constructed barges. Reliefs and inscriptions even depict large teams pulling colossal monuments across prepared roads using ropes, sledges, and lubricated sand to reduce friction. So moving heavy stone was certainly within their capabilities. What makes the Osireion unusual is the scale involved. Some of the granite beams resting on its pillars are estimated to weigh close to 100 tons. To appreciate what that means, consider this comparison. Many of the limestone blocks used in the Great Pyramid weigh only a few tons each. Even the enormous granite beams above the king's chamber, long considered among the greatest engineering accomplishments of ancient Egypt, are generally estimated to weigh less than the largest stones found inside the Osireion. Moving one stone of that size would have been an extraordinary achievement. Moving several of them, transporting them hundreds of kilometers, lowering them into a deeply excavated chamber, and positioning them with remarkable precision would have required an astonishing level of planning. Yet, despite Egypt's rich written history, no surviving inscription describes the construction of a monument quite like this. That silence has intrigued historians for generations. The mystery becomes even more compelling when you examine the stonework itself. The granite blocks were not simply stacked on top of one another. Their surfaces were carefully shaped so they meet with exceptional accuracy. Even after thousands of earthquakes, erosion, and shifting groundwater, many of the joints remain remarkably tight. Modern visitors often notice that the seams appear almost invisible. No mortar binds the stones together. Their immense weight alone keeps the structure locked firmly in place. Such craftsmanship reflects a remarkable understanding of stone cutting and structural engineering. It also explains why the Osireion has survived while countless other ancient buildings have gradually disappeared beneath time. But engineering is only part of the puzzle. The monument itself sits below the surrounding ground level. A long descending passage leads into a central chamber that today is partially submerged beneath groundwater. At its center stands a raised stone platform surrounded by water, creating an appearance unlike almost any other monument in Egypt. Many Egyptologists believe this flooded design was intentional, symbolizing the primordial waters from which, according to Egyptian creation beliefs, life first emerged. Others suggest the flooding seen today has become far worse in modern times due to changes in the regional water table, particularly after large-scale engineering projects altered the flow of the Nile during the 20th century. If that's the case, the builders may never have intended the lower chambers to remain permanently underwater. This distinction is important because precision stonework like that found throughout the Osireion is usually associated with structures meant to be admired in dry conditions. Whether the water was always part of the original design or whether it is largely a modern phenomenon remains an active subject of discussion among researchers. By now, one thing had become unmistakably clear to the archaeologists who first excavated the monument. They weren't simply uncovering another temple. They had exposed one of ancient Egypt's most unusual architectural achievements, a structure whose construction methods, appearance, and purpose refused to fit neatly into familiar categories. And as they continued documenting every block, pillar, and inscription, an even bigger question began to emerge. What if the accepted story of who built the Osireion wasn't as straightforward as history books suggested? When the Osireion finally emerged from centuries of sand and debris, the monument immediately divided opinion. The men responsible for excavating it were not inexperienced adventurers chasing legends. They were respected archaeologists working according to the highest standards of their time, carefully recording every stone, measurement, and inscription they encountered. The first major excavations took place in the early years of the 20th century, when teams began clearing the structure hidden behind the temple of Seti I. As the sand was removed, it became increasingly apparent that this was no ordinary extension of the temple complex. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Just a short distance away stood one of Egypt's most refined New Kingdom temples, every available surface covered with beautifully executed reliefs and hieroglyphic inscriptions. Yet the Osireion presented the exact opposite impression. Massive granite pillars rose from the floor without decoration. Immense stone beams stretched overhead with almost brutal simplicity. Rather than displaying artistic elegance, the building seemed designed to emphasize permanence, weight, and raw strength. Some archaeologists found this difference difficult to reconcile. If both monuments truly belonged to the same royal building project, why would they appear so completely different in both style and construction? The question became even more intriguing when researchers examined the inscriptions associated with the monument. There is little doubt that the name of Pharaoh Seti I appears within the Osireion. His royal cartouches are present, and for many scholars, this has long served as the strongest evidence that he commissioned its construction in the 13th century BC. But others noticed something unusual. The inscriptions do not appear to be fully integrated into the architecture in the same way they are throughout Seti's temple. Instead of forming part of a carefully planned decorative program, several seem to have been carved onto already finished stone surfaces. To some early excavators, this suggested a different possibility. Rather than proving Seti built the monument from the ground up, the inscriptions might simply demonstrate that he restored, reused, or dedicated an existing structure for religious purposes. Throughout Egyptian history, pharaohs frequently claimed older monuments by adding their own names or restoring ancient buildings that had already stood for centuries. This practice was not unusual. Many rulers repaired temples built by their predecessors, replacing damaged inscriptions with their own, or adding new dedications that linked themselves to sacred places. Therefore, a royal cartouche alone does not automatically settle the question of original construction. That observation led several early researchers to propose a controversial interpretation. Based on the monument's architecture, construction techniques, and unusual appearance, they believed the Osireion could predate the Temple of Seti I itself. Whether it belonged to an earlier period of Egyptian history or represented the preservation of an even older sacred structure became a subject of continuing debate. It is important to note that this remains a minority viewpoint. The majority of Egyptologists continue to identify the Osireion as a New Kingdom monument associated with Seti I, arguing that its intentionally archaic design was meant to evoke Egypt's distant past rather than actually belong to it. Even so, the questions raised by the first excavators have never completely disappeared. Why does no other monument from Seti's reign employ this same massive megalithic style? Why abandon the elaborate decorative traditions of the New Kingdom for a design that appears deliberately ancient? And why was the Osireion meant to imitate a much older architectural tradition? What inspired that remarkable choice? More than a century after its excavation, Those questions continue to fuel discussion among archaeologists, historians, and independent researchers alike. The deeper the investigation goes, the clearer one fact becomes. The greatest mystery surrounding the Osireion may not be its enormous stones or flooded chambers. It may be the story of its origins. This story remains frustratingly incomplete despite decades of careful study. In the next chapter, we'll examine the competing theories surrounding the monument and explore why scholars continue to disagree over one of Egypt's most enigmatic structures. At the heart of the Osireion mystery lies a debate that has continued for more than a century. It's not simply about when the monument was built, it's about how the available evidence should be interpreted. Today, most Egyptologists agree that the Osireion was constructed during the reign of Pharaoh Seti I, who ruled around the 13th century BC. According to this interpretation, the monument served as a symbolic tomb or cenotaph dedicated to Osiris, the god of the underworld and resurrection. The unusual appearance of the building, they argue, was entirely intentional. Instead of designing another richly decorated temple, Seti's architects deliberately created a structure that looked far older than the buildings surrounding it. The massive granite blocks, the plain walls, and the flooded central chamber were all meant to evoke Egypt's earliest religious traditions and the timeless realm of Osiris himself. From this perspective, the Osireion was never intended to resemble the temple of Seti I. It was designed to transport worshippers into a different world, a sacred space representing the beginning of creation, where the primordial waters surrounded the first island of land according to Egyptian mythology. The theory is certainly compelling. It explains why two neighboring monuments could appear so different while still belonging to the same king. It also accounts for the religious symbolism of the water-filled chamber and the monument's position directly behind Seti's temple. For decades, this explanation has remained the dominant academic view. However, not everyone is convinced. Some researchers point out that building in an older style is one thing. Reproducing an engineering technique, unlike anything else from the same period, is something entirely different. If Seti's builders truly possessed the knowledge and resources to quarry, transport, and position granite blocks weighing close to 100 tons with extraordinary precision, why is there no comparable structure from his reign? Across Egypt, countless temples built during the New Kingdom still survive. They are magnificent monuments, showcasing exceptional craftsmanship and artistic brilliance. Yet none employ the same massive megalithic construction seen inside the Osireion. That absence has led some historians to ask an uncomfortable question. If this remarkable engineering capability existed during Seti's lifetime, why does it appear only once? Normally, technological achievements leave a trail. Successful construction methods are copied, refined, and repeated by later generations. Ancient Egyptian builders certainly followed this pattern with temples, pyramids, obelisks, and monumental statues. But the Osireion seems to stand alone. Supporters of the mainstream interpretation argue that this uniqueness simply reflects the monument's special religious purpose. Since it was intended to symbolize the eternal realm of Osiris, there was no reason to repeat its design elsewhere. Critics, however, remain unconvinced. They believe the monument's distinct architecture may indicate that it belongs to a much older building tradition, one that was already ancient by the time Seti I ruled Egypt. In this view, the pharaoh did not invent the structure. Instead, he restored it, incorporated it into his temple complex, and associated his reign with one of the country's most sacred locations. Neither interpretation answers every question. The mainstream theory explains the religious symbolism remarkably well, but leaves some engineering puzzles unresolved. Alternative theories highlight genuine architectural differences, but often rely on evidence that can be interpreted in multiple ways. This is why the Osireion continues to occupy such a fascinating place in archaeological research. It isn't because experts ignore the evidence, rather it's because the evidence itself allows for more than one interpretation. Every granite block, every inscription, and every architectural detail contributes another piece to a puzzle that remains frustratingly incomplete. And perhaps nowhere is that puzzle more evident than in the monument's enormous scale, a scale that raises questions not only about how it was built, but also about the people it was designed to serve. Could its colossal proportions have been purely symbolic? Or do they point toward another explanation entirely? That's where the mystery takes an even more intriguing turn. One of the most striking features of the Osireion is not its age, its location, or even its massive granite blocks. It is its scale. The moment visitors descend into the structure, they are confronted by architecture that feels oversized in every direction. The doorways tower above a person's head. The granite pillars rise with imposing strength. Massive stone beams stretch overhead, creating the impression that the entire monument was designed according to proportions far larger than those required for ordinary human use. Of course, monumental architecture is nothing new in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians built pyramids visible for miles across the desert. They raised obelisks weighing hundreds of tons and constructed temple gateways that dwarfed the people passing beneath them. Grandeur was an important part of royal architecture. Yet some researchers argue that the Osireion feels different. Unlike temple pylons or pyramid complexes designed to impress from a distance, the oversized dimensions here are experienced from within. Standing inside the central hall creates an unusual sensation. The architecture doesn't merely dominate the landscape, it dominates the individual. Every pillar seems larger than necessary. Every doorway appears taller than expected. The entire structure feels as though it was conceived according to a scale that exceeds practical requirements. Mainstream scholars explain this as symbolism. The monument was dedicated to Osiris, one of the most important deities in ancient Egyptian religion. Its immense proportions may have been intended to emphasize the power of the gods and the eternal nature of the afterlife. By making visitors feel small, the architecture reinforced the idea that they were entering a sacred realm beyond the ordinary human world. This interpretation fits well within known Egyptian religious traditions. But alternative researchers see the matter differently. Some suggest that the unusual proportions support the idea that the Osireion originated from a much older architectural tradition. They argue that the monument's dimensions, combined with its megalithic construction techniques, distinguish it from other structures of the New Kingdom. Others go much further, proposing theories involving forgotten civilizations, lost engineering knowledge, or even non-human influences. Most archaeologists reject such claims due to a lack of supporting evidence. Nevertheless, these theories continue to attract public attention because the Osireion presents genuine mysteries that remain unresolved. The fascination lies not in proving extraordinary explanations, but in understanding why the monument differs so dramatically from the structures surrounding it. Then there is another factor that continues to complicate the investigation: water. Today, much of the Osireion sits partially submerged beneath groundwater. Visitors often see dark pools filling the lower sections of the monument, reflecting the granite pillars and creating an atmosphere unlike any other archaeological site in Egypt. the flooding has become one of the greatest challenges facing researchers. Many experts believe groundwater levels have significantly risen during the modern era due to changes in the Nile's flow and regional irrigation practices. If that assessment is correct, the monument we see today may not accurately reflect the conditions experienced by its original builders. This matters because water is slowly damaging the very evidence archaeologists need to study. Every year, moisture affects stone surfaces, weakens joints, and obscures details that could help answer long-standing questions about the monument's construction and history. In a sense, time is working against the investigation. The Osireion has already survived thousands of years, yet some of the clues needed to understand it may be disappearing before modern researchers can fully examine them. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. What if the greatest mystery of the Osireion isn't who built it, but why it was built in the first place? Because once we move beyond debates about dates and dynasties, another puzzle emerges. What purpose required such immense effort, such extraordinary stonework, and such a unique design? To answer that, we need to explore the deeper religious significance of Abydos itself and why this sacred landscape may hold the key to understanding the monument's true role.